The Resident Evil series can be seen as a trailblazer in many ways. It spawned the survival horror genre when Shinji Mikami's new horror project took the world by storm in the 90s. Resident Evil 7 was one of the first high-quality AAA games playable entirely in VR, and everything in between has left a legacy few games could ever hope to rival. Does the latest entry in the series carry the weight of that legacy, or is it just a mindless zombie shadow of what it used to be? Find out with me right now as I review Resident Evil 3 Remake. Remaking old media seems to have become a huge trend in recent years.
Oh, come on. Not again.
And I believe it could be argued that Resident Evil started this trend for video games when the original PS1 classic was reimagined on Nintendo's GameCube. Continuing the trend it started then, Capcom has since remade Resident Evil 2 and now 3 from the ground up. Wasting absolutely no time at all getting started, Resident Evil opens in returning protagonist Jill Valentine's Raccoon City apartment. She receives a mysterious phone call and is alerted to the fact that the outbreak unfortunately has engulfed the entirety of Raccoon City. Taking place 2 months after the Spencer Mansion incident from Resident Evil 1 and concurrently with Resident Evil 2, Part 3 catches up with Jill Valentine, now a suspended Raccoon City police officer, as she tries to piece together what Umbrella, the pharmaceutical turned bioweapon manufacturer, are now up to, forcing her to have to battle her way through a city of terrors and unfolding a government-wide conspiracy. Resident Evil 3's combat and movement system takes a lot more from Resident Evil 4 than it does from the original trilogy. Gone are the tank controls and imprecise gunfire. In its place, classic over-the-shoulder aiming and free movement. Although you can move in any direction, the movement speed is kept to a slow but fair pace. You're able to outrun most enemies, but just barely, which keeps the tension at a high level that we're used to with Resident Evil. Throughout the game, Jill and secondary protagonist Carlos, who returns from the original game, arm themselves with pistols, knives, grenades, assault rifles, and a host of other weapons. Ammo is of course a limited resource by design. You will always seem to just barely have enough to get you through the next situation, but never feel comfortable with your current supply, which speaks to the game's great level and scenario design. The combat is tense and satisfying, enemies are hard to down and you can usually only take 2 to 4 hits yourself before succumbing to some horrible and graphic end. Headshots are all important here, and with the shuffling motion of the zombies, the rush of adrenaline when you get the job done is palpable. Enemies will often get back up for one last scare, so don't forget to check them with your knife or one last shot to be sure. Always keep an eye out for environmental hazards, like exploding red barrels or electric generators that allow you to freeze enemies in place. This will make a huge difference in your efficiency when playing through the game, as some rooms will spawn multiple zombies at you, or worse. As well as the traditional shuffling undead, there are a host of other Umbrella Corporation creations inhabiting the sewers, the streets, and the buildings of Raccoon City. Avoid being infected by a parasite, and try not to get eaten whole by a hunter gamma. Narratively, Resident Evil 3 does what it does well, but takes a gameplay heavy approach. There isn't much dialogue in the game, but what is there is well written to the theme and very well delivered by the cast.
Carlos, do you copy? Carlos! Oh, shit.
Returning characters Nikolai and Mikhail hold up this high standard, as well as Carlos and Jill. Some action movie level one-liners ensures Jill's place in the pantheon of great female protagonists in video games. Scattered throughout the city there will be news articles, handwritten letters, intel reports or emails to read to flesh out the story, and reading them does make a difference in understanding what's going on around you and even helps you solve some of the game's puzzles. Thankfully, the puzzling in Resident Evil 3 makes logical sense for the most part, unlike what the rest of the series is used to, and mostly kept to a minimum while still representing itself enough to be a Resident Evil game. On a first playthrough, Resident Evil 3 took me roughly around 8 to 9 hours, which is a very short runtime considering the full price of the game, and a point of contention for some. I was a little bit disappointed that some of the locations from the original and the dialogue choice options didn't make the cut. However, the short runtime ensures that the game has no fat at all. Every minute to minute moment feels high in tension and worth your time. Throughout the campaign, Jill and Carlos control more or less the same, but with a few key differences. Carlos is decked out with some higher gunfire from the start, while Jill starts with nothing and has to find her way through. Jill eventually gains access to a lockpick, opening access to some secret items. Carlos has a melee attack, and Jill has a dodge roll. Although Jill is the protagonist of the game and Carlos certainly has his part to play in some of the shorter sections, it's almost inarguable to me that Nemesis is the star. The unstoppable,
Rolex! Wearing!
unkillable,
Kiss stealing! Woo! Wheeling dealing!
flame wielding,
Limousine riding! Jet flying!
walking death machine.
And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
Hell-bent on destroying the stars, Umbrella's new bioweapon relentlessly pursues you through the game, instilling a fear that is incomparable. Given that the scenario has been changed up from the original game, even series veterans are never going to know when Nemesis is going to burst through the wall behind you, jump in front of you, or throw you across the screen. Just when you think you're safe, he reminds you that this is Raccoon City and you're absolutely not, leaving you with that sinking feeling that you're always being watched. I highly recommend playing with headphones on, as the sound design is fantastic, and hearing him running towards you from behind as you try desperately to get out of his way never stops being both exhilarating and terrifying. You can choose to take him down with a well-timed grenade and get rewarded with an item drop, or just book it out of there. Gone are the fixed camera angles of the classic horror movie inspired past, but being able to spin the camera takes nothing away from the horror or atmosphere. Capcom's RE engine makes sublime use of lighting, shadow and texture to make sure that you never feel comfortable outside of those precious save rooms. One area in particular, however, takes this concept a little bit too far, and the sheer lack of light becomes more of a frustration than a legitimate source of fear. Adding to the survival element of the horror, inventory management is still a huge part of this series. You have a limited capacity for carrying items. Larger items like a grenade launcher take up 2 slots of your inventory, and each gun's spare ammo takes up a slot of its own. You will find yourself making difficult decisions about whether to bring 2 medicinal herbs for those all-important heals, or 1 herb and some extra ammo. Storage trunks are a welcome return, allowing you to stash items that you may need later in save rooms. Ink ribbons are gone, but typewriters are still a source of relief, as it saves your current progress, eliminating any further backtracking if you die. Given how good the game looks, I was very surprised at how smoothly it ran, having basically never encountered any frame drops or stuttering. Having more closed-in environments and the phenomenal lighting of the RE engine has really gone in its favour. The only technical hiccup that I did notice, however, was one scene when the audio went completely out of sync with the animation.
And this is one big ass if. We can deliver the vaccine to them before they launch.
And that's just more than a little bit distracting. Overall, if Resident Evil 3's only purpose was to recreate the PS1 classic and make you feel every bit as scared as you were in the 90s, it's a resounding success. It doesn't rely too heavily on jump scares, and when it does so well. Areas never really overstay their welcome. Even though you are made to backtrack through, it still feels fresh, with enemies changing as you go. And the puzzles don't come anywhere near as jaw-grindingly frustrating as the previous games. Yeah, sorry, I can't stand the traditional Resident Evil puzzles of old. Take the blue diamond and put it into the spear of truth and go down the stairs and put it in the locker, I don't know. There are a few blemishes, like the short runtime and some locations that I would have liked to have seen be included, not making it into the cut, and it likely won't be remembered as well as Resident Evil 2, but it just might be my new favourite in the series all over again. I score Resident Evil 3 Remake 8.5 out of 10. Absolutely unmissable for a Resident Evil fan, and anyone who's interested in horror needs to jump in. As always, thanks for making it this far in the video. Please do check out some of my other content if you have the time. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, press that like button, and stay safe.